Back when I was younger, even now, when I would get a present, so you get the present, and it comes with like a card, and you open the card, and you think, but you really just like throw away the card because you want to get to the stuff. What did you get? But as I get older, you realize that if a person made time and effort to put in the card, sometimes the card is more meaningful than the present. I mean, of course, we like the money and the check or the whatever, but what's the idea of the card? Why is it important? Is it part of the gift? And I want you to think about that in that context. When you think about that, and it's with a certain mitzvah. There's a mitzvah called Mikra, Bikkurim. Mikra means the reading of the Bikkurim. We all know what's Bikkurim. Bikkurim is the first fruits. Bikkurim is the mitzvah to say the first fruits that you grow in your field. You tie the red string around it, and you take those fruits, you bring them, and you give them to the Beit HaMikdash, you give them to the Kohen, you give them in a sense to Hashem. In a way, you're saying thank you to Hashem. Wow, the first fruits, the best, even before I take anything, I give it to Hashem, and that's wonderful. But in addition, the Torah says, not the Mishnah, the Torah says that you have to not only give the Bikkurim, you have to say something. The Kohen takes the basket from you and places it in front of the Mizbeach in the Beit HaMikdash, and then the Torah says, you should raise your voice and say before Hashem the following: Arami Oved Avi. An Aramean, a lost Aramean, my father was. My father, or it's hard to translate what it means, we'll talk about it. Vayered Mitzrayim, and my father went down to Egypt. Vayagar Sham b'mitei ma'at, and he dwelled there with few in numbers. Vahisham legoy gadol atzum varab, and there he became a great nation, a great and powerful nation. Vayareu otanu hamitzrim, vaya'anunu, and the Egyptians, they afflicted us, and they did bad to us. Vayitnu aleinu avodah kasha, and they placed upon us hard work. They enslaved us, they made us slaves, as we know, in Egypt. Vanitzak el Hashem elokei avotenu, so we cried out to Hashem, the God of our fathers. Vayishma Hashem et kolenu, and Hashem heard our voices. Vayar et onyenu ve'et amalenu ve'et lachatzenu. Hashem saw our affliction and our toil and our pressure. Vayotzienu Hashem miMitzrayim biyad chazaka u'bezorah netuya u'b'mara gadol. And Hashem took us out of Egypt with a strong hand and an outstretched arm and great awesome power, morah, fear, gadol, u'ba'otot u'b'moftim, and with signs and with wonders. Vayivienu el hamakom hazeh, and he brought us to this place, means Eretz Yisrael. Vayiten lanu et haaretz hazot, and he gave us this land, Eretz zavat chalav u'dvash, a land of milk and honey. Ve'ata, and now I'm going to finish the last pasuk. Hine heveiti et reshit pri ha'adama asher natata li Hashem. Behold, I now have brought the first fruits of the land that you, Hashem, have given me. So let me just recap. What do? You bring the Bikkurim, then you have to say the following: Arami Oved Avi. You start with Aramean. My father was a wandering Aramean. We think it's talking about Yaakov. We're not sure exactly what it's talking about. So first question is, who is Arami Oved Avi? That's the first question. The second question is, I'm bringing the Bikkurim. And all of a sudden, what do? I tell the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. We went down to Egypt, and they afflicted us, and Hashem delivered us, and then Hashem brought us to the land of milk and honey. It's very nice. What in the world does this have to do with Bikkurim? Why is there a need for me to make a declaration, a Mikra Bikkurim, in order, at the same time that I actually give the Bikkurim? Third question is, why is this a separate mitzvah? And finally, of course, what message is relevant for us? What are we supposed to learn? If I don't bring Bikkurim, what can I learn? What ideas can I learn from this mitzvah of Mikra Bikkurim? I'll ask you one more question. Did you recognize Arami Oved Avi? Do you recognize that text from somewhere that you might be familiar with? Where else do we read, other than in the Torah, this text of Arami Oved Avi, and why? That's an interesting question. But the idea being, this is a mitzvah that we call Mikra Bikkurim, right? The reading of the Bikkurim, that's a separate mitzvah connected to the bringing of Bikkurim. And obviously we have to ask ourselves, and we'll talk about, why is it important to have a mitzvah of declaring, of reading this text, of making this declaration to Hashem when we bring the Bikkurim? All right, have a great week, and we'll talk about it, Be'ezrat Hashem, on Sunday.